Welcome to dkdox.tv. My name is Morten Borik, and today's topic will be Zindzi Mandela. Zindzi Mandela was born on December 23rd, 1960. She was a South African diplomat and poet who served her country as ambassador to Denmark. To get a broader understanding of Zindzi Mandela and who she was, I had a talk with songwriter, producer, singer and photographer Metta Carter. What was your relationship with Zindzi Mandela?
I met Zindzi Mandela because I was summoned to the embassy as an ethical counselor on the matter of transnational adoptees situation in Scandinavia. South Africa has 230 South African adoptees under the age of 10. And Zindzi Mandela, the South African ambassador, is the mother, or was the mother of 5 adoptees. So since I planned like one of the world's first support concerts for transnational adoptees with a conference, her political counselor had heard about that conference and he attended, and he actually summoned me to come give Cincy counseling on the situation for transnational adoptees in Copenhagen, in Denmark, in Scandinavia.
When was the first time you met Cincy?
I met her in 2015, and right after our conference and support concert, some of the extremists inside the transnational adoptees had actually created a forum for POC, people of color. So they were creating yoga for people of color. And for me, that was an extremely dangerous step towards apartheid. So I went into a dialogue with the transnational adoptees. I understood their rage, I understood their need for safe space, but I felt seduced to support them, both economically and spiritually and emotionally, and then they turned up with this POC. So I actually said to them, I'm going to consult the yoga teachers and ask them what do they think about this. And they would tell me, you do not understand the concept of POC, people of color. And I said, it's strange to me because I've been a person of color.
Why would you say that?
To say you don't understand why we need this safe space, you don't understand where the actual principle is coming from. It's coming from the states, they're doing it in the universities, they're creating these safe spaces for people of color to be together and not having to feel the pressure of Caucasian people are being around or being victims of racism. So we need that in Denmark. And I said, my response was, this is not about me not knowing the principle of POC, because of course I do, I'm a person of color, so how can I not know it? It's simply you not knowing the principle of yoga. And we can't just kidnap yoga into our racial causes and just take any sports and make it our like a battlefield. So I sort of swore to eliminate that kind of apartheid and make sure that that class would never happen. Because as I said, if you do this, what will you do the day you come home from school or you come home from work and you find that your child is not being allowed into a soccer class because it's for white people only? What will you do then? Because this is what you're doing right now, and this is apartheid. My first impression of her, the very first thing that happened was that, you know, getting to the South African embassy is quite a big honor and challenge, and I felt like I couldn't even speak. The words couldn't come out. I was so nervous, and I'm coming in there, and my first impression, I saw this beautiful woman on the stair, and I just ran and I embraced her, almost falling on my knees, saying thank you, and she was like, yes, but the ambassador is upstairs. So I just embraced somebody, but when I came to her, she embraced me as the very first thing, and then she said, I know you from somewhere. And I was like, oh, oh, you do? And we just instantly connected. And my first impression was this extreme, warm person, inclusive person, listening, caring, compassionate. And all of my fear just melted. It melted in seconds because she was so compassionate. And she sat me down and she allowed me to speak about my life and my struggles and my hardship. Yeah. And that was just, for me, it felt like unconditional.
Do you know what brought Zindzi Mandela to Denmark?
Yes, she was summoned here as an ambassador because she's been working, both her and her older sisters are ambassadors. She's the youngest daughter of Winnie and Nelson Mandela, and they've been working as ambassadors. So she was here on a 4-year period with her children and her whole staff.
But is that because they have a special relationship to Denmark?
No, it's not because of the history with the ANC, but Denmark has been one of the first countries that actually supported the ANC internationally. And of course they have that friendship relation. But I believe that Cincy had been, the ambassador had been in Korea before and other countries, the States as well, and because they are usually going for a 4-year period.
Do you know what her impression of the Danish people was?
I think she was very happy to be in Denmark. I think she felt very supported, and she liked the peace in Denmark. It gave her a chance to be focused more on family and focus on sports and supporting the grassroots. And I know she felt that kind of peace to just relax was like gold for her. And of course she had that big respect for the ANC supporters, the old grassroots from Denmark. Yeah.
You were the founder behind the Freedom Speech and Concert event.
Yes.
And Carter Studios was the sponsors of the event. What was the purpose of this event?
There were several purposes, and you can talk about what ticked me, because there's always this kind of sparkle, that kind of provocation or something that actually is gonna say, you're gonna do something, I have to change a certain situation. What ticked me was the fact that the Danish government, on a one vote, simultaneous vote, actually said okay for a law separating ethnic citizens and Danish citizens in the commune of Brøndby, for instance, where they had reached a limit of 50% ethnic population, and they said that the people under this new law would be the second generation of transnational adoptees. So that applied not to me as a transnational adoptee, being a Danish citizen, but it applied to my son, who were the second generation. So all of a sudden, he wasn't free to actually settle down in Brøndby Øster by law. Of course, this created a massive turmoil in the government and from the different grassroots and organizations. But I got so provoked by this that I cried, and I was so angry and saying, now it's gone too far. And I knew that Ambassador Mandela had kept some very exclusive events of female empowering. And I said, we got her here. Why don't we hear anything more about her? She got to help us. She must help us to learn how to fight, because our problem is sometimes that we feel this anger and injustice, but how do we organize? How do we fight? How do we create change? So that was my one tick off, saying, we got her here, let's bring her. She hasn't been a lot in the media, she's been hiding a little bit, and we have one of the world's biggest freedom fighters here. Now let's get her. And that was one side of it. The other side of it was the legacy.
Yeah.
The legacy of Winnie Mandela, the legacy of her, the legacy, of course, of
her father,
Nelson Mandela, being these life, world-changing personalities, struggling their whole life. Nelson being in prison for 27 years, the women struggling his battle. It was to pay gratitude. It was a tribute event, paying gratitude to Cincy, paying gratitude to the Mandela family for taking these struggles for us.
Metta, I think we should hear and see the speech that Zinzi Mandela gave at the event. Yeah. And then we can talk more about it later. Yes. Look here.
It's such an honor to be with you here today. Before I start, I'd like to share, as Metta's asked me to share as many anecdotes as possible, right? You've asked me to be an eye specialist tonight, so I must talk I, me. One of the fondest memories I have of the first time I met Michael Jackson, I was with my dad. Michael was wearing his famous red and black outfit. You know, that military jacket, red and black with gold, and the black hat. And, of course, one red sock and one black sock. So as my father's sitting there talking to him, he's so distracted by these mismatched socks, he can barely concentrate. And he's freshly out of prison, so he's used to routine, structure, and uniform. So he's like quite distracted, and then before Michael leaves with Elizabeth Taylor, he calls me aside. And he says, darling man, did you realize that he's wearing one black sock and one red sock? So I say, yeah, I mean, I think it's a fashion statement. He says, no, I don't think so, man, darling. I think just to save him potential embarrassment before he goes on to his next meeting, just point out the fact that the socks do not match. So I had to say, no, Tata, you know, we will embarrass him actually if we point it out, because I think this is a statement that he's making as a young person, and you know, he's an artist. This is how he chooses to express himself. And this is all about artistic expression, Metta. Thank you, Metta, for organizing this event. I know that it's been very difficult. The power of a woman. As we say in South Africa, watintum fazi, watintum bogoto, meaning that when you strike a woman, you strike a rock. So just to share, I'm not going to take for granted that everybody knows the life story of a Mandela or a black South African woman. My story is not unique. My story is very typical of millions of black South Africans. The difference here is that I had a warrior mother who was very loud and who was very fierce, and she fought the fight. She made it a point that nobody forgot who Nelson Mandela was. She made it a point that she hoisted the flag for the fight of freedom so high that the ANC was recognized and all the freedom fighters of South Africa's role was recognized. My life had its challenges. As much as I don't like to define my life according to the suffering, I choose to define it according to how we have overcome that suffering and championed our own cause and maintained our dignity and would not let anything be taken away from us more than what was taken away from us physically. I was only 18 months old when my father went to prison. I barely have any recollection of him whatsoever. My first recollection, my mother couldn't believe that I remember this because I was so young. I just remember her taking food for him when he was still held in the Pretoria police station. And we were sitting in the car, and I think because my sister and I were so young and alone in the car, and it was very dark, we were afraid, and that stuck with me. I remember distinctly the dish that she took the food in, for him to eat. It was his favorite food. And that stayed with me for a very long time, because you will realize, like in situations like ours, food is just not food. It becomes soul food. Even as we cook in our family kitchen, we sing as we cook. All of us, we just break out into song. This becomes like a form of expression and a form of you tying the family together. It's not just putting together papa and vors. It's a whole journey and a whole mission. So I do remember that. And then beyond that, I would just hear my father being spoken about. But I did realize that there was something to this name. Because even when you're playing with other children or you come across certain adults who ask you who you are, there was always a reaction. It wasn't just indifference. It would either be an emotional reaction or one of fear, because there was a fear of being associated with us, or one of hostility, because there were many who hated him, who referred to him as a terrorist, who wanted him to be hanged, but celebrate him today. So that was the reality. There was always some kind of response, and we realized that there's something different about my father. When I hear the children talking about their fathers, I've got no stories to share, because at the same time, you couldn't get anything that you could read about him. You were not allowed to talk about him because you faced potential jail incarceration. That was the reality. So anyhow, when people often say, your father, for him to be so forgiving after being incarcerated for 27 years, after everything that he went through, I will then ask, what did he go through? Because people at times, especially from outside our community experience, refuse to acknowledge what he was put through. And what he went through is what was being done to his family whilst he was behind bars. The brutality of the apartheid regime meant that I, as a 5-year-old, my sister just above 6, ended up in boarding school in Swaziland. And why? Because everywhere that my mother took us to school, the system, as we refer to them, would come to that school, harass the school principals, and we'd be chased away from the school. She would have to be, she learned to be creative to try to keep us educated. She then developed a trick of straightening our hair and changing our names and taking us to so-called colored schools. And the same thing would happen there, where the system would catch up with us and intimidate the principal, threaten them with detention, and we'd have to leave the school. So at the age of 5, I was at home, not able to go to school. And my sister, just over 6, also at home, not being able to go to school. And somebody heard about our plight and offered my mother and said, look, I can help you, let me take these children to school in Swaziland. That was the reality. That's how we ended up at boarding school, at a place where neither she could come and visit us because she was banned, she was under house arrest, she wasn't allowed to travel. So from an early age, we learned how to be independent, how to be very vigilant about what is happening around us, and we learned how to pay more attention to the condition of our people. We were very aware from an early age that there was something out of kilter with the way society or the community was supposed to be structured. So we go to school, to boarding school in Swaziland. It was a Roman Catholic boarding school. The name was Our Lady of Sorrows, very appropriate name if any of you have been raised by nuns. So we went to the school, and from that early age, in that environment, you're surrounded by religious hymns and so on. And then you learn to utilize those very same songs, the Christian songs, to put in your own political lyrics. We learned to do that while still at school, whilst young. Oh, I see. If you're saying Zindzi Mandela, okay? Instead of us saying, the song I'm referring to says, the way ahead is difficult, there are many thorns in our path, kneel down and pray. We changed it to say, where there are many thorns in your path, take out your spear and clear the way, meaning that you're dealing with the system. So we learned that you could use whatever tools of artistic expression there for you to perpetuate your message and for you to be highly motivated. I wish there was a song that we all knew together here that we could sing together, because this is our tradition in South Africa. You don't just speak, okay? You'll do your Amandla, Viva this, Viva that, then we all burst into song together. We call it boosting the morale. We are all fired up and we all feel like we are one unit of something. We are all a collective, especially in this world of such displaced communities, paranoia, and fear. So anyhow, we were there at boarding school in Swaziland. And of course, then there was the difficulty. It was always a challenge to be able to visit my father, because he was only allowed 2 visits a month, and each visit had to be only 30 minutes long. And where was he? In Cape Town. And where are we? In Johannesburg and Swaziland. So we would have to choose a weekend to go and see him, where you see him for 30 minutes on the Saturday, 30 minutes on the Sunday. As if that wasn't harsh enough. To see him, you'd have to see him like, obviously there's a barrier, there's no contact visits allowed. You must see him always sitting down, and that was a psychological thing, that you mustn't see how tall the man is. That's another way that they deal with you psychologically. Always see him seated, and you walk into there, and on either side of the partition are 3 prison warders, 3 prison warders. So you cannot even have a constructive discussion, because everything you talk about is monitored. Sometimes you are just silenced and the visit comes to an end. So there you are, you've come all the way to see a loved one, and even that 30 minutes can be reduced to 15 minutes. That was the brutality of it all. Whether it was for him and his wife or for him and his children, this was how the system worked, the brutality of it all. And therefore, what became more important in this, where your family was fragmented, you developed struggle cousins, or you developed relatives by virtue of them being the same struggle as you. So we always had somebody staying with us at home. Every day we ask, like, people on the run getting shelter through our home. You ask, my mother says, oh, this is so-and-so, this is your cousin. Okay, pleased to meet you, cousin. Then before you know it, that cousin is gone. Before you know it, another 2 cousins arrive. These are people who are constantly on the run. But again, with the limited resources, my mother taught us from an early age that with nothing, you are able to share. In all our African homes, and Kosi will tell you, you are taught that if a visitor comes and you're still eating, you have to hand over your plates, and your mother removes all the meat from your plates and gives to the visitors. So you learn to be very clever. You eat your meat first and wait for visitors to come and you can share the rest that's not as delicious or nutritious. But anyhow, the important thing here is that we did not allow the system to break us. Even when they tried to isolate you, we made it a point that we remained very much a part of the community. And there again, I give my total respect to my mother, because without her, that would never have happened. The strength of women and the role that they play is so often overlooked in society, with us being direct participants in this, overlooking the role that women play. So it wasn't very easy in those years. What it meant sometimes was, when we come back from boarding school, the very day that we come back, my mother is arrested by the security police. So we get there and we find a dark house, a cold house, a lonely house, and an empty house. And the neighbors will then, those who are brave enough, will then take us in, look after us, or try to find a relative to alert that these children are alone, so please come and be with them. So you can imagine what it's like for a child to come from boarding school. There's nobody at home, and when you do have access to seeing your mother, she's behind bars as well. And this is something that they often did to try to break her, to try to break us. So that as we grow up, the choices that we make, we must want the perfect, ideal family existence. That means you must play it safe, you must be quiet, you mustn't be vocal against the system, you must just be a good native. And this we would not allow. We saw to it that from an early age, we got very involved in politics. We were activists on the ground. My father, I remember him also having a long talk with me saying, I will not allow you to go into exile. I don't know where it came from. This family has already sacrificed so much, you need to be here. So because of his fears and so on, we then joined the underground movement. Underground movement, feeling that it's important in life that when somebody tries to silence you, that you become as vocal and as loud as possible. Whoever our creator is, the first instrument you were ever given is your voice. That's the first instrument. So that needs to be heard loud, continuously. And we have a slogan that says, break the silence. We constantly have to break the silence. We would not, and I think when I talk again about my mother, she's a typical example of that, of how you should always be vocal. Even today, she remains very vocal when other people choose to play safe, choose to look after their narrow self-interest as opposed to being very vocal about whatever it is that's going wrong in society or around them. And for that, I salute her. I think it's very important. Now, when you have a system that tries to silence you, whenever you speak, you are thrown behind bars, you are harassed, you are tortured, all of that, you find other creative ways of expression. And that's in fact part of our history as South Africa. So many of our stories have been documented in theater, in song, and through the spoken word. You may have heard of a poet called Mzwakhe Mbuli, who was also very popular in Europe, who would say through his poetry, he had an AK-47 of the mouth, everything that he said. And everybody listened to him. And even when at some stage he was behind bars, people were still listening to his poetry. We had artists like Silo Chico Twala, who, because you were not allowed to mention Mandela by name, came up with a song called We Miss You Manelo. But we all knew when we sang along what he meant. The system did not, but we understood. And even the way he put together the video that spoke about We Miss You Manelo. Manelo was supposed to be a young girl who fell pregnant and left home because the parents were upset with her. So the pregnancy was very symbolic of a future and a free South Africa. And the man that he used to play the part, this girl's father, bore an uncanny resemblance to my father. So in that way, Silo Chico Twala also made a statement. You had somebody like Brenda Fassie, who sang My Black President, and we all knew who she's talking about. At that time, when some of the artists were still being pretty cautious, she was bold enough to do that. One cannot also overlook the role that music played in our lives as children. How my mother used to play us Nina Simone's To Be Young, Gifted and Black, making it a point that we know from an early age, we know those lyrics, we understand them, and we sing along. And then she would skip across and then play us Handel's Messiah, because she wanted us to appreciate all forms of music to grow our minds. Because remember, apartheid was designed to keep you in boxes. My mother always made it a point that she helped us with tools to break free, that you shouldn't be in a box in the first place. You should be out there. You should be able to appreciate and love everything. So she taught us that, the importance of those lyrics that she always played for us. Listening to Maotela Queens, the Manhattan Brothers, who subsequently went out into exile, listening to their stories as well. She plays something for you and she says, do you know where they are? And you hear their music is beautiful. It's lovely music. It's music you want to dance to. It's music that you want to sing along to. But these people were regarded as a threat by the system and they've had to leave the country. We've got artists like Jonas Gwangwa, who was in exile, and he was in an accident that literally incapacitated him for a while. What he did was to take the young military operatives from MK, the military wing of the ANC, those who had been injured and who could no longer perform as soldiers. He formed a musical group called the Amandla Group, and they were able to also document some of our struggle songs and keep that cultural perspective of struggle alive. Those are people that you cannot overlook. There is an artist called Dorothy Masuka, who has the most beautiful music, but people rarely know her story, that she herself was also an MK veteran, a stalwart of the struggle, who alone did an operation where she had to walk, carrying a DLB 67 kilometers or so for her to go and execute a task, alone. So this is a woman who sometimes when you see her on stage and so on, you don't, some people may not realize or feel her pain, but she's given up a lot beyond, she's a lot more than what you have on this side of the microphone. She's contributed a lot to the struggle. I think it's very important for dialogues to be had, especially with the current geopolitical environment. We have to have these conversations. It shocked me when we had at Mandela Day, when the young lady was talking about a radio station or a program here where people are allowed to make racist jokes in the guise of Danish humor. That is not acceptable. It's not acceptable. Try cracking those jokes in South Africa and let's see what's going to happen. I invite you anytime. Because in South Africa, first of all, in South Africa, you will be arrested. Number two, you will be penalized. I think our last racist slur lady was charged 150,000. You will get that. Thirdly, you will get an education. You'll be forced to attend a workshop where you are where our philosophy is don't hate, just educate. That will happen, and I think that needs to happen here. Because I've had discussions with people here that I really look up to and respect who will say to me the same thing about, oh, but do you know that Negro is Latin for black? And then I'd say it's the intention, by the way, and the effect that that name has on me that matters. And this is a two-way street. If Negro is okay for me, then please embrace racist slave master for yourself. It's a two-way street. I think it's so very important in a society where some of us have been at the receiving end of racial incidents where you're not allowed to use the word racism. People get uncomfortable here, whether it's in schools or, community halls. When you talk about racism, it's like it doesn't exist. And I'm thinking, where are we? Where are we? It's important to have these dialogues because we spoke earlier on about the importance of liberation of all of us from these mindsets. The mindset that says I'm superior, the mindset that dictates somebody's inferior. We all need to be liberated from that. We don't exist in isolation. We're part of a bigger global family. And the sooner we learn to look into ourselves and address our mindset issues, so much better will this world become. In the words of Mahatma Gandhi, you are the change that you want to see in this world. You cannot possibly say you admire a figure like Nelson Mandela, but you treat his people in another manner. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. Nelson Mandela didn't just start and end on Robben Island. He just got there after 27 years and said, I forgive my captors. No. He comes from a village. You see, he tends to be depicted as this tree trunk with no roots, no branches. Those roots are the indigenous knowledge systems he's learned from the village. That's what informs him. That community of Kunu, Mkhwezweni that raised him, that's where he gets all those values that we admire today. The branches, the leaves, and all of that are the people, like the continent, his people all over the world, his people of color where you might see them. So I often get so taken aback by people who want to see him and admire him in isolation, something he himself would never have liked you to do. He never saw himself as anything great in isolation. He would always say, my movement and I, my colleagues and I, even when a personal matter of being separated from his wife in that press conference, what did he say? My colleagues and I have decided, my colleagues and I. He refused to be seen as this great person in isolation. So you cannot have this double standard of admiring this man, but anybody else that you see who looks like him on the pavement, you've got an issue with. No, you cannot. And people who are here are not, people who find themselves here relying on your generosity and on your charity are not here to harm anybody. It's conditions that have brought them here. So I'm just appealing to our sense of compassion and our sense of Ubuntu, what we call Ubuntu, the philosophy that says, I am because you are. We are all one entity. We are all one human family. We all come from one ancestor. I think I should rely on Professor over there with your South African tourism skills. You do such a good marketing spin for South African tourism. People need to visit the continent. You need to visit South Africa. You need to visit the cradle of humankind and see from where we all come. We all have a common ancestor. So the fact that we look different is not the issue. In fact, we should actually be able to say we should have unity in our diversity. With all our different talents, skills, and backgrounds, we can create a much more beautiful society. We need to show this to our children because we're all raising children and some of us are raising grandchildren. It's very important for us to create the type of climate that we want our children to grow up in. We want them to be positive, motivated individuals. We don't want them to be fearful, suspicious. We don't want that. What type of society are we creating for these children? It's so very important. And I appeal to you that even as Metta takes these dialogues forward, that we continue having these dialogues amongst ourselves wherever we find ourselves located. It could be in your commune and so on. It could be in schools. Please talk about things that you don't understand and your fears and so on. It's important to engage one another because speculation is such a dangerous thing. When you speculate, you inevitably think negatively as opposed to positively. When you speculate, an element of suspicion has to creep in. So please just park your smartphones for a bit, especially the young generation, and engage, talk to one another, do things together. It's so important. I find it so disturbing. Maybe it's because of my age. I was born before, we say BC, before computers, but it kind of like when I see my 7-year-old busy, like all the time, and then he's allowed to take this thing to school, and I say, that's not going to happen. When you get to school, you're going to talk to your friends. You're going to play with your friends. And then here you can just use it for communicating. If you need to get hold of mommy quickly, you need to speak to daddy, yes, but it's not going to be like an obsession whereby your communication relies on one little instrument, and that as well takes away your sense of humanity. You are governed by this little technological thing. Please, please, let us learn to dialogue more. Let us rise to our higher selves. We all have it in us. We all have challenges. We all have fears and so on. But through platforms such as these where we can dialogue and have a rich exchange of ideas, we can create a much more powerful, dynamic people and create a better world for our children. Thank you.
So, Metta, now we have heard the speech of Zindzi Mandela. Do you have any final words? I mean, what is the struggles today now? You talk about fighting. What is the fight today?
It depends on who you are. I have a different fight than a lot of other people because I have a complex background. But the fight today, we can actually refer to the Black Lives Matters, which is a tool that has resonated worldwide now to shine some more, to shine awareness on justice, and it's working. For me, I still think we have to move beyond the name calling. We have to erase it completely. Actors like Denzel Washington says that the actual racism is being born by the sheer fact of using the expressions black and white. So if we take that out, the duality, polarization and the duality. If we take that out, we can actually eliminate racism and just talk about economy and justice for humans. Yeah. And but I think the problem in Scandinavia, because this is where we are. We're not in the States. In the States, they still have to struggle on the level where they're doing it with the Black Lives Matter movements as their support, but still in the States they have such a major internal problems, so we can't really adopt the American concepts to a land like Scandinavia. Personally, I think, seen from the outside and the inside, that we in Scandinavia, we have the absolutely best opportunity of creating an equal society because we have the best economical foundation and education for most people. So it's actually seeing that opportunity instead of starting to create even more and more stigmatizing and separation and all these things. They belong to America. We're not American. We have a different story here, and we need to address the issues that are here with
and not be afraid of talking about it.
Yeah, and not just taking on these images that doesn't apply to the society that we live in. Because the problem right now with taking on images like Black Lives Matter is that the duality, the opposite will rise in that second we do that, so white life matters will come up on the other side, and we are creating...
But what is wrong with saying all life matters?
The thing is that, and that's seen from the perspective of the BLM movement, is that they find it racist because that they don't think that is the actual truth.
It takes the focus of their case.
Yeah. And they need the focus to be on them because they are the ones who are in the receiving end.
But isn't there a danger of also for the opposite racism happening? I mean, racism the opposite way also.
Yeah, and there's danger. What I see as the biggest problem is if our youngsters take on this uniform and are being branded and stigmatized. Personally, for my son, who is of African descent, I was getting so... But he's a performer. He has shown with his art that he can connect hundreds of thousands young people in all nationalities. Right now, when he steps onto the stage, will he have like a BLM branded on his forehead? Will he be walking down the street now and all people see is Black Lives Matters? Now he's just a black person, that Black Lives Matters. Where he was actually, before then, he was just Noah Carter, an artist. But now he is also becoming this person. And he had, I'm happy to say, a good 27 years of not having to struggle that fight. He could be himself. So, and what I'm afraid of is the fear that I saw rising in some groups on social medias, where they're putting up images of Caucasian people shooting African American people and Africans, and a lot of youngsters were on that vibration, saying, yeah, that's how we treated it. But that was 400, 200, 300 years ago. It's not your reality today. If you scare the young kids enough to believe that they are in a constant danger, they will start arming. They will start...
they will fight for their freedom.
Fight for their freedom, maybe in this country against a ghost that is not really there. And to take identity and take identification into something that they really need to free themselves from. So we have a huge challenge right now to sort out information for the youngsters. So they don't just take on the bad habits, but they take on the real struggle, empowerment, but not the bad habits of it, or the backside of the metal of it, meaning war.
Okay.
War, yeah.
I will let that be the last word.
Yeah, okay.
And thank you very much for joining.
Yeah.
And giving this insight to who Zindzi Mandela was.
Yes.
Thank you out there, and thank you for watching. Remember to share and like our programs. Tak fordi du så med. dkdox.tv leverer uafhængigt web-tv og er et gratis alternativ til mainstream-mediernes narrativ. Vi har brug for dig. Bliv fast støtteabonnent med vores Subscribe-star, eller giv en donation via GoFundMe. Gå ind på dkdox.tv og se hvordan.